Hello everyone, welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional journeys like this, please like, subscribe, and help us reach 10,000 followers. Your support means everything to us. Amid the stillness of the night, Tieu Nu walks through the glowing city streets, clutching a bundle of flyers with Truong's face printed on them. The man who once promised she'd never have to wait, but vanished without a trace. Each flyer she posts is a silent cry, a message carried by the cold wind. Her hands tremble as she tapes the paper to the lamppost, the picture fluttering as if it were alive. Around her, life continues, cars rushing by, laughter spilling from distant cafes, but inside her, time has stopped. She steps back, eyes fixed on the photo, whispering softly, "If you can see this, please, find me." Just then, a shadow pauses near the poster. Someone is watching. The wind howled as Tieu Nu pushed open the glass door of a small copy shop. The smell of ink filled the air, the machines humming as they printed dozens of missing flyers, all bearing the same face. Truong. Her hands were trembling slightly as she stacked them together, still warm from the printer. 30,000 for the copies, the old shopkeeper said. Tieu Nu hesitated. That was almost everything she had left. But after a deep breath, she pulled out a few crumpled bills. "Please, just print them all," she whispered. As she stepped outside, the last rays of sunlight painted the streets gold. She walked quickly, clutching the flyers to her chest as if they were her last thread of hope. Each step echoed against the empty pavement. At every corner, she taped another flyer to a wall, a post, a bus stop. Her fingers were sticky from the tape, her palms raw from the rain. Everywhere she went, people stared. Some looked away, pretending not to see. Others gave a sad smile but said nothing. Still, she kept going, because stopping would mean giving up, and she couldn't. When she reached the old bridge, the wind nearly tore the papers from her hands. The river below roared like a reminder of everything she'd lost. She pressed one last flyer to the bridge railing and whispered, "Let someone see. Let him see that I'm still here." Her reflection appeared faintly in the dark water. Tired eyes, messy hair, but a stubborn glimmer of hope. For a moment she thought she saw Truong standing beside her reflection, smiling like he used to. She reached out, but there was only the cold night air. A small laugh escaped her lips, half sorrow, half strength. "If we ever get lost," she murmured, remembering his promise. "You said you'd be the one to find me first. Looks like I beat you to it this time." She turned, heading toward the market square, her silhouette fading into the neon glow. Somewhere out there, among the thousands of faces she believed, he was watching. The market was alive with morning light. The smell of steamed buns, the chatter of vendors, and the rhythmic clatter of chopping boards filled the air. Tieu Nu walked through the narrow aisles, carrying a woven basket filled with river crabs she had caught before dawn. Every few steps, she looked up, eyes scanning faces, searching, always searching. Every motorcycle that passed made her heart skip. Each echoing horn felt like a possibility, but every time, disappointment followed. The world seemed determined to test her patience, and then she froze. At the far end of the crowded market stood a silhouette, tall, familiar, and heartbreakingly distant. The man was standing near a row of fruit stalls, his back slightly turned, his head bowed as if studying something on the wall. A flyer. Her flyer. Tieu Nu's breath caught in her throat. The noise of the market dimmed, everything else blurring. The man's hand lifted to touch the paper, tracing the photo with his fingertips. Her voice trembled. Truong? The man turned. For a split second, the world stood still. The eyes, those same gentle eyes, locked onto hers. But there was confusion there too, and something deeper. Guilt. He took a step back. Her heart screamed, "Don't go!" But her lips could barely form the words. "It's me," she whispered, stepping forward. "You came back, right?" But he didn't answer. He looked around, uneasy, like someone afraid of being seen. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared into the alley behind the market. "Truong!" she cried out, her voice echoing across the stalls. Vendors turned, startled, but she was already running. Her basket hit the ground, crabs scattering across the wet tiles. She didn't care. All she could see was his shadow slipping away. She pushed through the crowd, knocking over baskets of fruit, ignoring the angry shouts. Her shoes splashed through puddles, her breath sharp and quick. The alley twisted ahead, narrow, dark, lined with hanging tarps and dripping pipes. "Truong!" she called again. "Please, stop!" A stray cat darted across her path. The smell of damp earth filled her lungs. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. And then, silence. She stopped. The alley was empty. Only her flyers fluttered on the nearby walls, soaked and peeling. The man was gone, as if swallowed by the city itself. Tieu Nu pressed a hand to her chest, fighting back tears. "Was it really you?" she whispered. A single flyer came loose, drifting down and landing at her feet. She bent to pick it up, and there, smeared by rain, was his face. Smiling, fading. She looked up at the gray sky and whispered, "I found you once. I can do it again." Her voice was quiet but firm, no longer desperation, but promise. The wind grew heavier as the sky darkened, rolling clouds swallowing the sun. Tieu Nu stood at the mouth of the narrow alley, the flyer still clutched in her trembling hand. The city noise seemed distant now, just the sound of her own heartbeat echoing between the concrete walls. "Truong," she whispered again, her voice almost lost in the wind. "If it's really you, why are you hiding from me?" From somewhere deep inside the alley, a faint sound, a cough, hurried footsteps. Her pulse quickened. She took a hesitant step forward, then another, until her shoes splashed into a puddle that reflected the flickering neon sign of a closed noodle shop. The air smelled of rain and rust. And then she saw him. He stood there, Truong, the man she had searched for all this time. Soaked, thin, and pale. His once neat hair was messy, his clothes worn. But it was him. She would know that face anywhere. "Truong!" She ran forward, tears already spilling down her cheeks. He turned sharply. "Tieu Nu, you shouldn't have come." His voice was soft but sharp, carrying a tone she didn't recognize. "Why?" she cried, stopping a few feet away. "Do you know how long I've been searching for you? Days, weeks, I never stopped." "I know," he said quietly, eyes dropping to the ground. "But it's not safe anymore." "Not safe?" Her voice trembled. "What are you talking about?" Before he could answer, a car passed by at the alley's end, its headlights slicing through the darkness. Truong flinched and took a step back into the shadows. "Please," she pleaded, reaching out. "Tell me what's going on. Why did you leave? Why now?" He looked up, and she saw something she had never seen in him before. Fear. Tieu Nu, there are things you don't know, he said in a low voice. I didn't disappear because I wanted to. I had to. She shook her head, refusing to believe it. You promised me you'd never make me wait. You promised. I did it to protect you, he interrupted, voice breaking. They were after me. And if they knew about you... The words hit her like a wave. Who? Who's after you? He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could finish, the sound of an engine roared from the street. A pair of black cars screeched to a stop nearby. Truong's face went white. They found me, he whispered. Run! What? Go, Tieu Nu, now! But she didn't move. I'm not leaving you again. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip trembling. Please, you don't understand. If you stay, they'll... Before he could finish, a group of men appeared at the alley entrance, their dark coats glistening with rain. One of them called out, Mr. Truong, you've made this harder than it had to be. Tieu Nu's breath caught. Her entire body froze. Truong pushed her behind him. Don't come any closer, he warned. The men laughed. You really think you can run forever? The moment felt like it stretched on forever. The pounding rain, the sound of footsteps, the tension so thick she could hardly breathe. Then Truong turned to her, eyes soft but desperate. If anything happens, promise me you'll keep moving forward. Don't stop looking for the truth. Truong, promise me. She nodded, tears blurring her vision. Suddenly, one of the men lunged forward. Truong shoved Tieu Nu aside and swung his arm, striking back. Chaos erupted, shouts, crashing metal, the clatter of footsteps as the two sides collided. Tieu Nu stumbled, falling to the ground. Through the chaos, she saw Truong turn, meeting her gaze one last time. Go, he shouted, and then the crowd swallowed him whole. She ran, her heart breaking with every step, the flyer crushed in her hand, its ink smearing into the rain. Behind her, voices shouted, tires screeched, and just like that, he was gone again. But this time, Tieu Nu wasn't the same fragile girl who had waited in silence. She stood beneath the streetlight, soaked and shaking, and whispered through her tears, If you won't run to me, then I'll run to you, no matter what it takes. The rain didn't stop that night. It fell harder, washing away the footprints in the alley, as if erasing every trace of what had just happened. But Tieu Nu stood there, drenched and trembling, her eyes still fixed on the direction Truong had disappeared. Everything inside her screamed to collapse, to cry, to surrender. But she didn't. Instead, she took a slow, steady breath. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the soaked flyer from the ground. The paper tore, the ink bled, but she pressed it against her heart anyway. This isn't the end, she whispered. Not yet. The next morning, the city was calm again, pretending nothing had happened. But Tieu Nu was different. She packed her bag with the few flyers that remained, tied her hair back, and stepped out into the misty dawn. Every part of her was tired, but her eyes burned with new determination. At the bus stop, she overheard two men talking about the fight in the alley, about a man taken away in a black car near the riverside. Her pulse quickened. That was her clue. That was him. Without hesitation, she boarded the next bus heading that way. The vehicle rattled along the uneven road, the city slowly fading behind her. She watched through the window as the skyline blurred into fog and rain. Her thoughts drifted to Truong's words. If anything happens, keep moving forward. Don't stop looking for the truth. The bus slowed near the riverbank. Tieu Nu stepped off, the wind whipping against her coat. Before her stood the vast water, glimmering under the gray sky. She could almost hear his voice carried by the wind, faint, but still there. She whispered, "I'll find you, Truong, no matter how far I have to go." For a long moment she stood in silence, then turned toward the small path leading deeper into the old docks. Each step forward was a vow, not of despair, but of courage. In the distance, thunder rumbled once more, echoing her promise. Because now Tieu Nu wasn't just searching for a man, she was searching for the truth. And nothing, not storms, not fear, not even fate, could stop her anymore.
Trong đêm mưa tăm tối, tiểu nữ cầm những tờ rơi in hình trọng người đàn ông cô yêu đi khắp phố phường tìm anh sau nhiều tháng. Vì thích, cô dán tường tờ rơi giữa dòng người vội vã, trong lòng chỉ còn hy vọng ôm anh. Một ngày, cô bất ngờ thấy bóng dáng quen thuộc nơi chợ đông, tưởng chừng đó là chồng. Cô đuổi theo, nhưng anh biến mất trong đêm tối. Ở đó, họ lại gặp trong khoảnh khắc đầy xúc động trước khi chồng tiết lộ mình đang truy đuổi một phải trốn đi. Giữa con hỗn loạn, anh bị bắt đi lần nữa. Dù tuyệt vọng, tiểu nữ vẫn đứng dậy, thề sẽ tìm chồng và sự thật đằng sau che giấu phía sau.